And how will I know what the wise decision is? Because the wise decision is going to guard your heart. The wise decision will be one that you can share and talk about. You won't have to be crooked and deceptive. The wise decision is the one that keeps you focused on the goals you believe God's given you. The wise decision is the one that puts your life on a trajectory of wholeness and holiness and beauty and joy and order and peace. And then the wise decision is the one that is in alignment with the integrity that God's called you to live. Well, hello, everybody. We are here, believe it or not, the last episode of Season 3, which is pretty crazy when I think about it. I believe this is technically episode 50, if I'm not mistaken, of everything we've been doing. Today, this particular episode, however you're joining us, which, by the way, thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Brian Jenkins, Theology Threads. Normally, I have someone else in the studio with me, but it's kind of just me today. And so thank you for being a part of Theology Threads. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the notification bell so you can stay updated if you're with us on YouTube, and also give us that great review so that your friends and family can find us, and maybe share an episode or two along the way. We get a lot of good feedback from people when they say, oh, I shared this episode. The one we just did on belief in Gen Z, a lot of people have been sharing that, getting some very interesting feedback. Thanks for the comments on our episode on women in the church. And so we appreciate some of those penetrating, insightful, and well thought out comments that were given there. But mostly just thanks for being a part of the Theology Threads community. And as we get ready to turn around and go into our 4th season, we got maybe some new things, maybe some old things, but we're looking forward to it. What I wanted to do in our last episode of Season 3 was really kind of focus on something that, interestingly enough, doesn't always get talked about when it comes to theology. Theology tends to be a conceptual craft. It's a conceptual art. You're thinking about things and you wonder if anyone else is really ever thinking about them. And it sits in this sphere, it sits in this space of really, well, what if and what about, and does anyone else think about this? And so oftentimes theology can get put off into the conceptual world. Well, I don't have time to think about that. That's not going to do me any good. Who bothers thinking about that? Why should I worry about, my theology of prayer? I'm just going to pray. Or why should I worry about why bad things happen to good people or good things happen to bad people? I'm just out here trying to live my life. And oftentimes belief and theology will get regulated to sort of this secondary priority in the everyday ongoingness of life. The other side of that is that there are people who never sit and think about, oh, I believe this, I believe this about, for example, we did the episode on women in the church. Well, how is that going to play out in your everyday relationships? Oh, I believe this about money. How is that going to play out? I believe this about even end times theology and the role that the United States should play, or prophetic truths. And so we say all these things and we're conceptual, and then we have our real life. But the bridge between those two, unfortunately, doesn't always connect. It doesn't always lay out. But when we talk about worldview, go all the way back, Season 1, Episode 1, Episode 2. When we talk about worldview, we have to remember that our belief system rests in what we think, but also what we feel and how we live. So what we think, what we feel and experience, and how we live. And it's in the living where I really want to spend the rest of our time, however brief we're together today, talking about, am I living my theology? Am I living my belief? And really, how do I do that? The problem is this, and I'm saying this as a theologian, as someone who has built his life on thinking about what I believe and thinking about stuff, and sometimes just sitting in a room thinking stuff up, and really lived a very conceptual life. And the issue is this, is that honestly, theology doesn't matter if it doesn't work in real life. It just doesn't. It is, in fact, a waste of time. This podcast is a waste of time if it doesn't move the needle on real areas in your life. What I preach, I'm on the preaching schedule for New Life Church where I serve this Sunday. I can talk about all sorts of really interesting historic things from Acts 3, which is the passage I'm preaching on. I can talk about the nuances of all sorts of things involved in there, about the Greek words being used, about the construct of the temple courts, about the idea of money and sickness and illness and all of those sorts of things. But if it just doesn't work, then what good is it? At some point, it has to work. It has to play out in real life. And so all of the discussions we have from episode 1 about, why does theology matter, into season 2 with our discussion of Corinthians, and to all of the concepts that we've talked about, faith and science with Dr. Struble, and weird theology with Dr. Tennyson, and worship with Cain and Baca. All of those things, they're somewhat irrelevant discussions. I have to admit that. If at some point it doesn't help you or help me or help any of us, help my kids, help your kids, our families, move the needle in how we live our everyday lives. And so my response to that issue, that problem of theology doesn't matter if it doesn't work in real life, is this statement, and I want you to grab this, is that theology can't just be knowledge or insight. It has to be, and this is what I want to focus on, it also has to be wisdom. So it can't just be what I know or the insight or the understanding or the perspective that I have. It also has to be the wisdom of how I live life. So how would we define wisdom? Well, Gerhard von Rad, who was a theologian and commentator, defines wisdom as competency in regards to the realities of life. Are the things that I know, the things that I believe, the things that I trust, the things that I find interesting, the things that I build my life on, do they develop competency in regards to real life, to the realities of life? Do I honestly live my life well? Do I live my life competently? Or, in spite of everything that I know, in spite of everything that I believe, in spite of all the knowledge that I have, in spite of maybe even the creative insight I have, is my everyday life kind of a mess? Is it chaotic? Are my relationships chaotic? Are my work skills and relationship chaotic? Are my finances chaotic? Is my marriage chaotic? Are my kids age appropriately chaotic? Is my life a mess? I mean, that's one way to say it, because if my life is a mess and it doesn't speak of the order and the peace and the joy that is in fact evidence of God working in my life, then what I believe honestly is kind of irrelevant, sort of ish, in a way, kind of. And so I have to say, is my theological belief, my theological pursuit, or my theological study not just producing knowledge and insight, but is it producing wisdom? Tim Keller talks about wisdom, and when he does, he refers to it as knowing what to do in the 80% of situations where moral rules don't apply. So most of life is not absolute. I think we just have to be fair about that. Most of life isn't really clear on what to do. Now, we should actually be excited when those moral absolute moments come into play, because those are the easy ones, right? We should know, I'm not going to kill this person. That's an easy decision. I'm not going to take something that doesn't belong to me. That's wrong. That's an easy decision. I'm not going to look at something and desire something that I should never have. Like, the 10 Commandments are easy moral solutions. But what about the other 80% of life when it comes to relationships, when it comes to finances, when it comes to navigating cultural complexities, whether here in the Pacific Northwest, or if you're watching this in Des Moines, Iowa, or if you're listening to this in Tupelo, Mississippi? There are moral complexities, there are cultural complexities to how you have to navigate your life every single day that aren't always absolute clarity. So what do I do then? What do I do with what I know? And that's where wisdom comes into play. That wisdom is our capacity to be competent in the realities of life that, and then to sort of paraphrase Keller on the back end of that don't have a clear, absolute moral answer. So people say, well, Brian, what does the Bible say? What does the Bible say about finances? It says a lot about finances. It just doesn't say anything about the interest rate you should have on your home loan. It doesn't. It says that people shouldn't charge exorbitant interest rates. It It says that people shouldn't cripple, but it doesn't say a lot beyond that. People say, well, Brian, what does it say about democracy in American politics? It doesn't say anything about democracy in American politics. It doesn't say about who you should vote for alderman or city council or for the dog catcher. It talks about character. It talks about integrity. It talks about the values of any given culture set, but it doesn't talk about the 80% of real life all the time. But it does call us into wisdom. And maybe where this comes from, in case you're wondering, Brian, where is this coming from? Is just there are times even in my own life where I can feel my centeredness start to shift and chaos start to creep in. And so what I want to do is share with you what I do in those moments where it doesn't feel like the theology of a thing is enough to bring me back to order, where the knowledge of a thing isn't enough to bring peace or to bring clarity to my life, where the insight of a given topic isn't enough to anchor me and to dial me into what's exactly in front of me today. And when that happens in my own spiritual life and in my own real life, I go back to the book of Proverbs. I will cling to the book of Proverbs. Now, that may not be the book you cling to. It may be the Psalms. It may be James. It may be Ecclesiastes if you're emo enough. I don't know. But I go back to what's just a good piece of advice? And for me, it's the book of Proverbs. So I want to share with you in our next few moments really just what is the passage that speaks to me quite a bit. And it's in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20. And it starts by saying this. And as you know on the show, we use the English Standard Version. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20. My son, be attentive to my words and incline your ear to my sayings. So this father, whomever are writing these Proverbs, is saying, son, I want you to lean in. I want you to really listen. I just don't want you to hear, but I want you to lean in. So what I'm inviting you, whether you're in the car, you're washing the dishes, you're on the treadmill, or maybe you've sat down to watch this with your family. We found out that some families watch these together. I just want you to lean in for a moment. Don't just hear, but listen. Don't just watch, but see. I want you to pay attention. That's what the author is saying. He said, and to my sayings, these little truths that I give you, my wisdom, pay attention to what I'm talking about, son, because I know what I'm talking about. He says, in fact, verse 21, you should let them not escape from your sight and actually keep them within your heart. He's using the language of these should be the most valuable things you have. Like you wouldn't let a fine piece of jewelry out of your sight. Like you wouldn't let a fine piece of fabric or linen, you wouldn't lose it. Don't lose these. Treat these sayings, my son, like treasure, because that's what wisdom is. Wisdom in some ways is the real treasures of life because it is both beautiful and practical. It is form, the beauty of form, and function tied together. And those, by the way, are the best tools that are incredibly useful and really cool to look at, right? So he says this. Why? So we see the word for, a little Bible study tip. We see the word for. So for is why should I do this? For they, what are the they? The sayings that he's talking about are life to those who find them and healing to all their flesh. Sometimes parallelisms are saying the same thing twice, but sometimes parallelisms like this are building. He says they're not just life, but they are healing. In other words, they're not just life, but they are a whole life. They're a complete life. Sometimes in faith, we just live, but we don't live healed. So wisdom can not just help us find life, find just the revival of life, but they can also bring healing to us so that we are back on track. We are whole in the life we lived. And he says 5 sayings. So let's look at the 5. One of them is very famous. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. The first saying that he wants his son, he wants his follower, I'm asking you to lean in and pay attention to. The first one is this. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the springs of life. Guard your heart with vigilance, for from it flows the well springs of life. Now, when you talk about heart in the ancient world, you're not talking about your seat of emotion. You're talking about the source of all that you are. So the first thing that he says is you need to guard your inner life. The best piece of wisdom I can give to you, if you're making a decision, if you're inviting a new person into your life, if you're maybe even if you're single, you're pursuing a dating relationship, if you are a business person and you're saying, should I go into business with this person? Should I make this deal? One of the things you're going to have to do is, how will this affect my inner life? You have to guard that inner life, because from it, everything else flows. Every way that we live flows from what's going on in our inner life. And guarding is interesting, because guarding both keeps things out and it also keeps the right things in. So make sure that you're keeping the wrong things, and you can go through all of those, and Proverbs tells you what a bunch of wrong things are, right? Immorality. We talk about 7 deadly sins on the podcast. Am I keeping the right things out, but am I holding the right things in? My truth, my doctrine, my integrity, my morality. But I have to make sure that my heart, my inner life. So heart, again, is not just emotions or affections. Sometimes this is used in like dating advice or that kind of stuff. What is being talked about here is that deep inner life. And I hope you have discovered, at the very least through the podcast, the importance of that inner life. That the inner you is being cultivated through prayer, through meditation, through doing things like the podcast, or reading some of the books we suggest, or studying God's word, not just as homework, but the cultivation and the safeguarding of that inner life through relationships, through people, through your work. Does your work actually guard your inner life? Go back to our episode on work in season 1. Does it guard that inner life, or is it eroding away at your inner life? Tough questions, but critical. So the first piece of wisdom we need to cling to is guard our inner life. The second one, he says this, and then put away from you crooked speech, put devious talk far from you. It is as practical and as simple as watch your mouth. Just be careful what you say. Not just because of the effects that it has on the exterior of you, but be careful for what you say because of what it cultivates inside of you as well. Sometimes there are things that we feel, and Proverbs says in another passage, only a fool gives full vent to his feelings. You don't have to say everything out loud, even if you're only still talking to yourself. Just watch what you say. Watch your mouth, especially crooked or devious talk. Don't be a liar. Don't be corrupt. Don't be filthy. Don't be profane. Don't be hurtful. As we would say in the South where I'm from, don't be ugly. If you're going to say anything, make sure you say something nice. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. That's a little oversimplistic. But is my speech, if it's time for me to speak up or to speak out, is it devious? Is it manipulative? Is it intended to lower someone by raising myself? Is it not beneficial? Is it not helpful? Is it crooked? In other words, is it even true? Watch your mouth. So guard your heart, which is what's going on inside, and then pay attention to what's coming out of you, because that's going to reveal what's going on. Verse 25, let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Your eyes and your gaze. What are you fixed on in life? What are you focused on? What is at the center of your attention right now? And whether it's the eyes of your heart, the eyes of your mind, but the eyes of your ambition, the eyes of your life goals, what is your gaze fixed on right now? That's my question to you. Right now, what is it fixed on? Is it fixed on work? Is it fixed on a relationship? Is it fixed on distractions like social media or sports? Is it fixed on the opinions of other people? What are you focused on? Stay focused on the right things directly forward and keep it there. Guard your heart, watch your mouth, and then stay focused on the right things. Stay focused on the things that God is laying in front of you. And as you do that, how do I know? That's where verse 26 comes in. Ponder the path of your feet, then all your ways will be sure. This is an interesting one to me. Ponder the path of your feet. My question is, do you know where you're headed? If you were to draw your life out into a straight line, where is life taking you now? Because if it's in chaos, you have no idea. I have no idea when my life is chaotic, where I'm headed in life. Am I pondering the path? Am I thinking about where I'm headed? I've a couple of family members, extended family members who are in recovery for various struggles and addictions. And one of the things that I've learned from them And they're great in their recovery, and they're solid, and they're celebrating their recovery. But one of the things that I've learned from them is the concept of playing the tape forward. If I keep going on the decisions I'm making now, where will I be? Where will this take me? Ponder the path of your feet. And I'm not just talking about work, but your attitude. If I keep this attitude alive in my heart, where will it take me? If I keep this unforgiveness alive in my marriage, where will it take us? If I keep this mistrust alive in my marriage, where will it take us? If I keep this pain and bitterness alive and I stay on this path of pain and bitterness, where will it take me? If I stay on this trajectory of ruthless ambition to get whatever I want in a short time, where will it take me? Where will it take my family? Ponder the path of your feet as you guard your heart. And then you pay attention to what's coming out of you. And then from there, you begin to focus on the right things. Ponder where that focus is taking you. Really think about that. Especially maybe, and I'm just kind of feeling this, maybe you're maybe you're a businessman, you're a businesswoman, and you've made some deals lately that you know were kind of a little shady or a little cutthroat, but it got you what you wanted. It's getting you set up. Okay, you've made those decisions. Keep making those same decisions, not just over the next 1 year or the 3 years or 5 years, but what happens if you stay on that path for 20 years? Who will you be at the end of it? If you keep, flirting with that person at work for the next 6 months, where will you be 6 months from now? If you keep ignoring that conversation with your kids, where will they be 6 months from now, a year from now? Ponder the path of your feet. Where am I headed? And then finally, verse 27, do not swerve to the right or to the left, but turn your foot away from evil. So break it down. Guard your inner life because it flows from everything. Watch what's coming out of your mouth. Stay focused on what God has laid out in front of you, on the things you believe God has laid in your heart. But then examine the trajectory, examine the heading. Where will my life land if I don't pivot or change directions? And within all of that, am I maintaining a path of integrity on my route there? Or am I straying to the right or to the left? Am I making the easy decision, the comfortable decision, the decision that's more convenient? Or am I making the wise decision? And how will I know what the wise decision is? Because the wise decision is going to guard your heart. The wise decision will be one that you can share and talk about. You won't have to be crooked and deceptive. The wise decision is the one that keeps you focused on the goals you believe God's given you. The wise decision is the one that puts your life on a trajectory of wholeness and holiness and beauty and joy and order and peace. And then the wise decision is the one that is in alignment with the integrity that God's called you to live. That's the wise decision. That's the one. Are these theological truths? Ish, I guess, probably. But what I refuse to believe is this thing where people say, well, I love theology and then I love practical stuff. You don't get more practical than wisdom theology. That how you believe and what you believe about the Bible and what it speaks to you then begins to extend, because guarding my heart means remembering who God made me to be, that God made it. Being aware of the trajectory of my life, being aware of my speech, being aware of my capacity to choose wicked and wrong things comes from the fact that I believe that we broke it. But the fact that his words can bring life and healing are because Jesus fixed it. And that I can invite people to lean in is because the church shares it. You see how that theology starts to play out in real life, but only if I'm applying and thinking through these things in the other 80%. If I am developing competency in regards to the realities, the concreteness, the tangible, the imminentness of life. So what are we to do after a talk like this, or what are we supposed to do from sharing this? So a couple of things. Number one, think about what you believe, ponder it, take some time. Even if you're not a thinker, just think for a second, well, what do I believe about this? And then play that out. If I believe this, it means this. And then I really want to encourage you. And then, like I said, this is the last episode of the season, and we'll have a little bit of a break before come back. So in that break, think about what you believe, and then I want you to feel what you believe. And I really want you to be passionate about what you believe. Like, let it get into your emotional set. Get excited about the grace of God. Feel the joy of God. Feel hurt and pain over the brokenness of the world around you. Feel that. But ultimately, my hope, my goal, and all of us here at Theology Threads, the whole team really, is that you will live out what you believe. Actually live your belief system. Like, really live it out. Let it seep into every area of your life. Let it pour out into your life. Let what you believe about eschatology and the last days make you an encouragement to persevere through hard times and make decisions that help you persevere through hard times. Let our belief that Jesus is Lord and God raised him from the dead, that there is an inevitable victory to our lives, let you operate from a place of victory and confidence, not a place of fear and defeat. Let what we believe about God making every single person, God made it, that God made you on purpose for a purpose, change the way you feel about yourself and the decisions you make about your own body and your own life and how you let people treat you and then how you treat others. Those are wise and insightful decisions. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for letting me go on a little rant, I guess. This is our very special episode. I didn't have a couch to sit in front of or a messy bun or sweats to do my apology episode, but maybe that's kind of what this was. But man, I appreciate all of you. Miles and I appreciate all of you. Drew, Kanan, Justin, all of our hosts, Sophie, the whole team, Devin, Isaiah, all of us here at Theology Threads. We love and appreciate you so much. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on all of our socials, share the episodes, and give us a 5-star rating. God bless you. We'll see you in a few weeks.